Om Tavakatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavivirididam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadadatam Bhuvigananti Bhuriyajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone. I hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving celebration. I know many of you probably weren't with all of the family that you hope to be with, but anyhow, we all tried to make the best of it. We're on the chapter, The Master with the Brahmo Devotees, Part 1. This is Sunday, November 19th, 1882, and we're on page 157. Sri Ramakrishna had been invited to Surendra's house in Calcutta, but he first went to the house of Manomohan Mitra in the neighborhood, and had a short visit there, and now is about to go to Surendra's house. So here we start. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at Surendra's house. Many devotees had assembled there, including Surendra's elder brother, who was a judge. Master, to Surendra's brother, you are a judge, that is very good, but remember, everything happens through God's power. It is He who has given you your high position. That is how you became a judge. People think it is they who are great. The water from the roof flows through a spout that is shaped like a lion's head. It looks as if the lion were bringing the water out through its mouth. But look at the source of the water. A cloud gathers in the sky and rain falls on the roof. Then the water flows through the pipe and at last comes out through the spout. Now we'll get many different conversations regarding this question of free will. It was a big issue in those days. It's been a big issue in Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy throughout the ages. And Thakur will say many, many different things about it. It's a very big topic. I, of course, won't go into every possible explanation, but a few things that we can try to understand. One is that from a very, very practical point of view, Thakur is saying don't have too much pride. He's saying don't have too much pride. Without being philosophical about it, we all know that circumstances are very strange and tricky things. That if things had been a little bit different one way or another, somebody who is working for us could be our boss and we could be working for them. Any little thing could have changed anything else. We have no idea why and how things happen. It's so capricious and so utterly beyond our capacity to really understand the whole funny idea of cause and effect, how one thing brings about something and not something else, and why one person succeeds and another person doesn't. We can say it's all in the hands of God, we can say it's our karma, we can give all sorts of different types of explanations. Sri Ramakrishna, when he talks about us having no free will, that everything is the will of God, the will of the Divine Mother, he's talking from a very high plane, and this is kind of the ultimate goal. He seems to equate this idea with actual God realization and the complete elimination of this lower type of ego. He really seems to be saying that once we can transcend this lower ego, this old self, once that dies, then we can truly say everything is thy will, because we have no ego, we have no special desire. Other times we see that our lack of perfect free will is seen from a psychological point of view. This is something that's stressed very much in the Gita and Sri Ramakrishna also, but in Gita especially, this idea of swabhava. We all have our own nature, or prakriti. We have our own makeup of tamas and rajas and sattva in the mind. We have our own samskaras, we have our own understanding of things and misunderstanding of things, and the decisions that we make are based on these things. So how can we say that they're completely free decisions? If we are filled with certain desires, that will taint everything. And if we're very selfish people, that'll color everything, and all of our decisions will be based on that, whatever strong tendencies are in the mind. So there's no absolute freedom that way. On the other hand, Thakur emphasizes this idea that the Divine Mother herself has given us this feeling of I and this feeling of responsibility. Otherwise, we'll do anything and everything. So if we go about doing things just for our own sake, on our own benefit, that are contrary to all norms of society, and we say that everything is Mother's will, then Thakur says it's perfect hypocrisy. So we can't fall back on that either. There are a couple of cases where somebody will raise that, well, everything is Mother's will, and they'll get a big scolding. This is one thing. Then there are other times when they're talking about this idea of free will, and everything is the will of the Mother. Everything is divine will. Thakur, he'll just out of the blue, he'll make a statement like, well, if you eat chilies, won't your tongue burn? Now, why does he say that? Now he's bringing this idea of karma. So everything is the will of God. Does that clash with this idea that everything is based on our own past actions, our own karma? This is God's plan, if we want to look at it that way. This is how it works out. So it's a very complex issue. I personally like very much something that Swami Vivekananda said. He said, when it comes time to perform action, feel as if everything depends upon you. Everything is in our hands. When it comes to the fruits of action and the results of what we do, feel that everything is in the hands of God. It's a very nice, simple way of looking at all of this. But Thakur was saying, don't have this feeling that I am such a great man because I work so hard, this and that. Plenty of people work hard. Plenty of people are equally qualified. There are plenty of people who are smarter than us, and just through good fortune, we may say God's will, we may say good karma, whatever, that we're in a certain position and they're not, or they're in a certain position and we're not. So he's saying, don't be too proud. This is enough. If we get that idea out of this, that this is enough, that we should have a little humility with regard to whatever we've achieved in life, and know that there are plenty of other people who, if they had had the opportunities that we had, would have done even more than we've done. We see people in the street, we may look down upon them and think, oh, they didn't make any effort to better themselves. If we had been born in their circumstances, with their family situation, poverty situation, all of that, we may have turned out worse. And if they had been born in our situation with many of the advantages, they may have turned out better. So we shouldn't judge anybody that way. We should feel tremendous gratitude if we've been able to reach any high level of anything. So he's saying he's a judge. It's a very high position for the Indians under British rule. This was one of the highest positions that they could have. So he says, very good, but remember, everything happens through God's power. It is He who was given. So that means don't have too much pride. That's all, however we understand it. Surendra's brother. The Brahmo Samaj preaches the freedom of women and the abolition of the caste system. What do you think about these matters? Now, this is another thing that we have to understand in context, because Thakur knew that this was a kind of a fad among the people of Calcutta in those days because of the Brahmo Samaj and other reform groups. It wasn't only the Brahmo Samaj. There were other groups that were interested in social reform to a large extent because of the British, and because the British were looked down upon many of the traditional practices of the society in those days. Child marriage and no remarriage of widows and different things like that. It was a very big issue. And Thakur, very often we have to understand things were correctives. If he thought something was going too far in one direction, he'll emphasize the other side. It doesn't mean that he had no interest in these things. But he came for those who had an opportunity to realize something higher in life, and he didn't want them to put all of their energy in the direction of outward-going things, societal things. So that's why sometimes it seems like he doesn't care about these things. It's not true. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had Swamiji and the order and everything be so interested in the welfare of society. Not that we go in for that type of social reform, but Swamiji actually, he was the greatest social reformer because he had one theory. One thing will take care of everything. What was that, Kumar? Education. Education. He used to say, give them education, they'll solve their own problems. What are the problem of women? That means that the women were not given the opportunity for education and work and other things. They were married at a young age. He said, hands off. Am I a woman that I'll solve their problems? Give them education and they'll solve their own problems. And the same thing with the poor, and the same thing with the outcasts and everything. Give them education, they'll solve their own problems. So there's great emphasis on education. And our order runs so many schools, and we've done so much work in the field of education. This was his solution for social reform. And to let it occur naturally. That's the other thing that Thakur wanted to see, that these things will occur, take place on their own if we can take care of the spiritual side of things. Swamiji had to face a lot of criticism from the point of view that Vedanta was world-denying, and many people felt that this was harmful to society, that Vedanta preached not caring about this world, only caring about God realization and everything. And Swamiji's answer was that it's not because of Vedanta, it's because Vedanta hasn't been put into practice that there are problems in society. Because Vedanta preaches the oneness of all the beings. That means you get rid of this privilege, you get rid of this higher class and lower class and all of that. So for Swamiji, education meant spiritual education as well as people learning means to earn a livelihood. So both things together. So he's asking him, what do you think about these matters? The freedom of women. Freedom of women was freedom from this child marriage. It was a great burden. And this idea that they weren't fit for education, they were fit only for being mothers and raising families. And they weren't given, of course, from a spiritual point of view, they weren't given access from ancient days to the scriptures and Sanskrit learning and things like that. So all of the different things about that. And then caste system. Master. Men feel that way when they are just beginning to develop spiritual yearning. So sometimes we start to think that, yes, we want to lead a righteous life, dharma. And this idea of dharma, we look outward instead of inward. It's not bad. He's not criticizing it that way. Say with Vidyasagar, we may think he was very critical of him. He's saying that he doesn't know there's gold within, as if he's an ignorant man. But so many times he said the work that Vidyasagar does is very, very good. He was a very philanthropical man. He helped so many people. He said the work he does is very good, but, he added that but. Vidyasagar was older than Sri Ramakrishna. In those days, that meant that he was really getting towards his final years, when Thakur felt that somebody with such a brilliant intellect and such sensitivity to the feelings of others, that if someone like that devoted his mind to God realization, that he could really have some higher type of experience. So that's why he was so forceful, speaking in those terms. So as men feel that way, when they are just beginning to develop spiritual yearning, a storm raises clouds of dust, and one cannot distinguish between the different trees, the mango, the hog plum, and the tamarind. But after the storm blows over, one sees clearly. After the first storm of divine passion is quelled, one gradually understands that God alone is the highest good, the eternal substance, and that all else is transitory. One cannot grasp this without tapasya and the company of holy men. What is the use of merely reciting the written parts for the drum? It is very difficult to put them into practice on the instrument. What can be accomplished by a mere lecture? It is austerity that is necessary. By that alone can one comprehend. The other thing is that without some very deep insight, it's very difficult for even good people, I don't want to say ordinary people, even good people, to really know what is the best way of solving any particular problem. We all may know that, yes, poverty is bad, that privilege of one class over another is a bad thing, that education is necessary, but how to implement these things. And Thakur always emphasizes the point, unless we have some deep grounding in spirituality, a little bit of ego will come in, a little bit of desire for people to be feel gratitude towards us, a little desire for some name and fame. These things will creep in. As a very mature person who can really do selfless work. So he wanted that spiritual maturity first. You asked about caste distinctions. There is only one way to remove them, and that is by love of God. Lovers of God have no caste. Through this divine love, the untouchable becomes pure. The pariah no longer remains a pariah. Chaitanya embraced all, including the pariahs. I've mentioned before that this was one of the features of the Chaitanya movement. And of almost all of the Renaissance, there was a devotional Renaissance period in North India, and something equivalent in South. I'm not as familiar with the saints of the South as of the North, but almost all of them, not that they were reform movements against caste, but they didn't care about caste. In the South, the Alwars, or who is it? Yeah, and many of them were very low caste. The poets and singers and saints were people who were considered to be very low caste people. And in the North, they weren't necessarily low caste, but they didn't care about caste. I may be wrong, but my assumption has always been that this title that's given Das among the Vaishnavas in Bengal is something so that people won't know what the caste was. So everyone is a Das, just as in the Sikh Dharma. Almost everyone is a Singh among the men. Of course, most of them came from the Kshatriya caste, but still, just this egalitarian idea that now, if you hear somebody's last name, generally in most parts of India, the people will know what caste they belong to, just by hearing the name. But this is one way to take all of that emphasis off, that we're all one as lovers of God. So most of the devotional movements were like that. Not all of them. Some of them are very caste-ridden, some are very restrictive to Brahmins and things. But in general, this is why I always see this very distinct difference between the movements that go back to the acharyas and those who go back to the very simple saintly people. The acharyas were a little bit orthodox, and their followers were a little bit tainted with this idea of caste, while the other simple devotional movements disregarded that caste. Last week or before I mentioned the Baos, who really take it to a great extreme. They disregard religion even, so that whether they're Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or Christians or anything, doesn't matter. And they all live together, they eat together, they live in these ashrams or akras together and sing and dance. And there are many beautiful songs about there's no difference between Hindu and Muslim. There's a wonderful film that was made a few years ago, I've mentioned a few times, on the life of Lalan Fakir. Is Moner Manush. It's very nice. There's some beautiful songs. He was a great saint, very saintly person, very simple, and wrote, I think, something like 10,000 songs. And Thakur, we never hear him mentioning him by name. He lived earlier. But Thakur sings some of the songs and mentions some of their teachings. So he was familiar with them. They exerted a great influence over certain parts of East Bengal and West Bengal. And one song is really nice. It's, how does it go? Ali upar Kali, na Kali upar Ali. Zolo upar Pani, na Pani upar Zol. It means, who do we care? Who is higher, Allah or Kali? Well, it makes no difference. Pani or Zalmi Jol. This is Bengali, East Bengal accent. So whether you call it Pani or whether you call it Jal, Thakur's example, it's the same water. So they had that idea that they didn't care. So, and all through this tremendous devotion, they all worshiping God. And so actually what Thakur did was, he took prevailing movements. It wasn't so much that he had a new philosophy and a new vision or anything, but he took all of these prevailing movements and demonstrated in his life. Others practiced them, and maybe one or two had some type of realization. He demonstrated the perfect realization of all of them in one lifetime. It's something unheard of in even with ancient teachings from the Vedas and Upanishadic teachings and these later movements, bowel movements and things like that. It was tremendous what he was able to do in his life. And he never claimed anything original. He never claimed that. He was the proof. He was the proof of his 1,000 years of traditions of all the religions. Although I still think he had a few original teachings of his own that we don't find. His ideas about jnana and vijnana and other things. The members of the Brahmo Samaj sing the name of Hari. That is very good. Through earnest prayer, he's saying that they're also devotees. He always called them bhaktas, and the bhaktas among them, they should have no caste distinction. Through earnest prayer, one receives the grace of God and realizes Him. God can be realized by means of all paths. The same God is invoked by different names. What has Thakur done? He's kind of moved the conversation away from caste and social reform to what he's really interested in. He didn't come to eliminate caste. He came to teach devotion and realization and self-awareness, self-knowledge. He came for a different reason. Surendra's brother, this is our judge. Sir, what do you think of Theosophy? This is a good example of someone who's not really a hardcore devotee. He's asking very peripheral types of questions. Theosophy was also a bit of a fad during those days. Colonel Alcott and Madame Blavatsky, and they had all these ideas about the astral planes and these Mahatmas living in different places. But it caught hold in India a little bit. I guess they were British originally. And even in this country, you'll still see Theosophical Society libraries and things in different places. It became quite a popular movement. It was helpful to one extent that it introduced some ideas of Vedanta or Hinduism in Western countries. They weren't antagonistic to Hinduism, the way some of the Christian missionaries were. So there were some positive things. They weren't helpful to Swamiji when he came to the West. One thing that we can say, even though he had nothing against them especially, but they weren't very helpful towards him. So this is the question, sir. What do you think of Theosophy? Master, I have heard, see, he doesn't know too much. He's heard a few devotees talking maybe. I've heard that man can acquire superhuman powers through it and perform miracles. I saw a man who had brought a ghost under control. The ghost used to procure various things for his master. What shall I do with superhuman powers? Can one realize God through them? If God is not realized, then everything becomes false. So the Thakur was very consistent that way. That he didn't care for these supernatural things. He didn't care for psychic powers. He was very one-pointed. That he would very often say, if they have devotion, if they worship God, then good. That'll be the bottom line for him. Now it's curious, and I hadn't noticed this before, that the next couple of entries only give the month and not the particular date. In the beginning we understand, but the one before this was November 19th. This simply says November 1882. So it'll be somewhere towards the end of November, second half of November. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Sri Ramakrishna arrived in Calcutta to attend the annual festival of the Brahmo Samaj. Already we've seen how many times he's come to Calcutta because of the Brahmo Samaj and the different festivals that are celebrated either in their hall or in a devotee's home, or sometimes in this what they call the lily cottage. Yeah. The Kamal Kutir. This was generally where Keshav was, and it was one of the places, and they had their own hall. They had different places where they met. This one was in Manilal Malik's house. So it says it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Sri Ramakrishna arrived in Calcutta to attend the annual festival of the Brahmo Samaj, which was to be celebrated in Manilal Malik's house. Besides M and other devotees of the Master, Vijay Goswami and a number of Brahmos were present. Elaborate arrangements had been made to make the occasion a success. Vijay was to conduct the worship. The Kathak, these Kathaks were scholars, but also not necessarily great pundits or anything, but they had a great knowledge of some of the scriptures, usually Bhagavata or other Puranas and things, and they could recite from them, and they could tell stories from them, and they could sing songs, and they do a whole production. I've heard of one or two. Even some of our Swamis can do it. They'll give nice talks like that, and they'll introduce a topic, they'll tell a story, then they'll sing a song. It's very beautiful to hear. So very often we find these kirtaniyas, these kirtan parties. They'll be invited to sing and have kirtan singing and dancing, or these kathaks will be invited, and they'll do these recitals that are also very nice. So this kathak recited the life of Prahlada from the Puranas. Its substance was as follows. Hiranyakashipu, Prahlada's father, was king of the demons. He bore great malice toward God and put his own son through endless tortures for leading a religious life. Afflicted by his father, Prahlada prayed to God, "O God, please give my father holy inclinations." Girish Ghosh also wrote a play on the life of Prahlada, which Thakur saw. At these words, the master wept. He went into an ecstatic mood. Afterwards, he began to talk to the devotees. Master, bhakti is the only essential thing. One obtains love of God by constantly chanting his name and singing his glories. Ah, what a devotee Shivanath is. He is soaked in the love of God like a cheesecake in syrup. Yeah, cheesecake is not, don't think of Swiss cheese or anything. This will mean the type of rasagola or something like that. Yeah, Thakur for some reason loved Shivnath. I don't know why. The Shivnath Shastri, he was one of the leaders of the Brahmo Samaj. He also, I don't know if he was officially called an Acharya or not, but he used to lecture. I heard he was big and fat. I remember reading one story about him. But anyhow, he obviously had mixed emotions about Thakur. He appreciated him on the one hand. He thought this is a very good person, a very simple person, very devoted person, who by spending too much time in spiritual practice has gone a little bit off his head. He used to say that behead hoye gachen, that a little bit pagal. And he wasn't the only one, of course. But by the time that the Brahmos came, Thakur wasn't known so much that way, but much earlier, when he went through his real divine madness. Then everybody thought that, even his mother and his brothers, that thought that he had. That's why they made arrangements for his marriage. They thought that this will somehow bring his mind back to the world, that he won't have this. They thought it was a type of disease. Bhagavad Thakur, they used to call them. The mad, holy man. But anyhow, so this is Shivnath, that later, it seems, especially after the split of the Brahmo Samaj, that he felt that Thakur had been a bad influence, maybe on Vijay, who later left and became a sannyasin himself, maybe even on Keshav. Their attitude of many of the Brahmas was very funny, that some of them liked to say that Keshav was a great influence on Thakur, that after Sri Ramakrishna met Keshav, how his views changed and everything. And then others would agree. Some people would say that Thakur was Keshav's guru. Of course, he wasn't exactly, no real initiation, but Keshav actually looked upon Thakur as far greater than him. Keshav had that type of humility. The others weren't so quick to do that. So this is the Shivnath. The only thing we read about him negative is that Thakur says he's a good person, but he doesn't keep his word. He said he would come and he didn't come. It turns out, we've read other things in the Great Master, that it wasn't simply that he forgot to come or anything like that, that he really didn't want to and didn't encourage the other Brahmos to go. He was afraid that the whole Samaj would fall apart. They would all become Thakur's devotees or disciples, something like that. Thakur, of course, had no interest in that, in this creating a movement or anything. Even Keshav, he would joke that Keshav would say, if I understand all of this, the highest teachings, will I be able to keep my movement? The dol. Huh? And Thakur said no. He said, okay, then that's enough for today. Let's stop here. So he's talking about what a devotee Shivnath is. He is soaked in the love of God like a cheesecake in syrup. One should not think my religion alone is the right path and other religions are false. Now, this was a common thing. We find Thakur saying this specifically to some very orthodox, one-sided Vaishnavas and to the Brahmos. There may be others also. We shouldn't think that these were the only ones like that. Some of the Shaktas were also, unless you worship the Divine Mother, that she is the only one worthy of worship. But it was more pronounced in some of these Vaishnava, especially the followers of Chaitanya Deva. The Brahmos were, they had their sophistication. They were a little different. It wasn't that Krishna alone is to be worshipped. It's a little bit like, these poor fellows, that they're still worshipping images and things like that, that we have some higher, deeper understanding, we're more educated, that we know the Upanishads. Huh? We're not simply following these Puranas. Some idea like that seemed to be in their minds. So a little feeling of being elite, that they were the cream of the crop, they were the well-educated Bengalis of Calcutta mostly. So he says, one should not think, my religion alone is the right path, and other religions are false. God can be realized by means of all paths. Thakur didn't put as much emphasis on the path. We shouldn't think that every path is so perfect and so wonderful. He would always say that there are errors in every religion, in every spiritual path. It wasn't the path that was so great, it was the devotee and the nishtha, the faith and devotion and dedication to spiritual practice. That was the main thing. It didn't matter, even in Guru, even if the Guru was not a good person, even if the Guru has some bad habits. One has taken initiation and one looks upon the Guru as God himself or herself, that the individual will benefit from that. Not that we shouldn't examine the Guru ahead of time. When he says that, there's an expression that he uses, this Jodopi Amar Guru Shura Badi Jai, Totopi Amar Guru Nityanandarai. He repeats it several times, that even if my Guru goes to the grog shop, goes to the tavern, even if he gets drunk, I should look upon him as Nityananda, as the embodiment of perfect bliss, so something like that. I think that this will be more with regard to those who have a Kula Guru, family Guru, that is a tradition that you're born in a certain family, especially Vaishnava families, that there'll be another Brahmin family that will be the Gurus for your family. And out of respect for that tradition, you receive initiation. Don't pay too much attention, are they really saintly people or not. This is that tradition. And something that's a little bit different. We're free to look for a Guru simply for spiritual purposes. Then he emphasizes you have to look at the character. That's something a little bit different. But if we've taken an initiation at a young age, as part of the family traditions, before receiving Gayatri Mantra, something like that at that time, and later discover that the Guru may have some bad habits, then we shouldn't pay attention to that. And it'll be our spiritual attitude that will be the most important thing. So the same thing with the spiritual path. Now, if it's too extreme, if it involves all sorts of spiritual practices that Thakur will criticize later, some of these tantric practices, then we should avoid them, of course. But if it's simply that there are certain superstitious ideas or certain one-sided ideas, he said, then push them aside. Don't worry about that. Follow the things that appeal to you with great sincerity, and you can have the highest realization. So God can be realized by means of all paths. It is enough to have sincere yearning for God. This is the key. Regardless of the path, this is the key. Sincere yearning for God. Infinite are the paths and infinite the opinions. So this is Pat and Mat. These are our two things, Pat and Mat. The infinite are the paths, and this is how Mat. This means whatever faith tradition we have is not any final truth. It's simply a path. It's a path to God. We shouldn't get stuck on that. Which are the conclusions, the siddhantas, the final teachings of this path? Are they true? Are they ultimate? Are they something that can't be questioned? He said, don't think of it that way. Think of it that you're treading a path, you're leaving something behind, you're going forward. Climbing the steps. Don't worry about is each step perfect. You're going to leave it behind. Anyhow, you want to get to the roof. That's the real thing. So don't pay too much attention to the path. Of course, we don't want to get involved in something that is contrary or not helpful. And we want something, this is why our Vedantic tradition is so wonderful, we want something that allows us to question and allows us to examine, is something logical or not? Does it make sense to us? Do we see living examples of it? So then we can have real faith in it and conviction in it. So the path may be secondary, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. And we should really choose a path that's suited to us. This was another great teaching of Thakur, that any path may be good, but it has to be one that we're qualified to follow and that will be beneficial and helpful for us. Let me tell you one thing, God can be seen. So now he's getting to the essential thing, that the realization that the goal, the end of the path is key. The path is just a means. And the path and the what he calls mat, the path and the teaching, the spiritual tradition, the faith tradition, the religion, these are both secondary to this ultimate goal of realization. Let me tell you one thing, God can be seen. The Vedas say that God is beyond mind and speech. The meaning of this is that God is unknown to the mind attached to worldly objects. Vaishnav Charan used to say, God is known by the mind and intellect that are pure. Now this is another very good example of how Thakur never claimed credit for some of the teachings that were the most important teachings that he had. And some of these may have been uttered by other people who didn't even realize the significance the way Thakur did. This Vaishnav Charan, his name comes up all of the time. He was one of the early pundits. He wasn't just a pundit. He was one of the real spiritual leaders of this one particular Vaishnava school at that time. And one of the schools that was a little bit looked down upon by many people. We had this Karta Bhaja sect and this Ghoshpara sect, Sahajiyas, there were many of them like that. Some of the things were a little questionable. They liked to take wine. The Karans, they would go off in pairs with who is your Krishna, who is your Radha, things like that. So he was part of that community. At the same time, he was very sincere, and Thakur loved him very much, and he was very devoted to Thakur, and he was one of the early ones who called Thakur an avatar. So they had this relationship, and here Thakur is giving him credit for this one teaching, because we read constantly that this manonasha, we have to destroy this mind in order to have some higher realization, that God is beyond mind and speech, that we leave mind and speech behind in order to have we read it all of the time, and Thakur constantly is saying, no, it's not true, that it's this ordinary mind that is incapable of realizing God, but there's something called the pure mind, and it makes sense, because otherwise somebody loses his mind, we go into some state where the mind is not functioning, the brain is not functioning. It doesn't mean we have God realization. We go into deep sleep, we don't get God realization. So it'll be the mind that transcends this ordinary state. Maybe it's perfectly quiet mind, maybe it's a mind that just ascends to a higher level. So we think of the kundalini, the different levels of the heart center and the neck and the between the eyes and the head, something like that. But he emphasizes this idea that God has to be realized through the mind. We have no other option, there's no other means, there's no other instrument, but not this ordinary mind, this pure mind. And he's giving credit to Vaishnav Charan for that. So Vaishnav Charan used to say, God is known by the mind and intellect that are pure. Now, that was the end of that quote. Therefore, it is necessary to seek the company of holy men, practice prayer, and listen to the instructions of the Guru. These purify the mind. Then one sees God. Dirt can be removed from water by a purifying agent. They had these little things, nirmali or something, little types of seeds and things that you could drop in water, and all the sediment would go to the bottom or something. Anyhow, he's using that type of example. Dirt can be removed from water by a purifying agent. Then one sees one's reflection in it. One cannot see one's face in a mirror if the mirror is covered with dirt. Then he says, after the purification of the heart, one obtains divine love. Then one sees God through his grace. One can teach others if one receives the command from God after seeing him. A new idea. Before that, one should not lecture. There's a song. Okay, now before we go on to all of this, is there any difference? Thakur starts out talking about purification of mind, and then he talks about purification of heart. This is a question that we get very often. Is there a difference between pure mind and pure heart? First thing that we have to ask, is there a difference between mind and heart? Huh? Is there a difference between mind and heart? It's very interesting that the Sanskrit word manas, which means mind, very often means heart. That there's not any real distinction between the two. The modern day people will think that mind will be connected with the head and the brain, and that the heart will be connected with the heart center and with the emotions, the devotion, and all of that. This will be the jnani and this will be the devotee. In the Upanishads, the locus of mind and locus of self are both the heart center. Both the heart center. This is the city of Brahman is within the heart. Meditation takes place within the heart. This is nihita guhayam. This is deposited, hidden within the heart center. Everything is in the heart. And if we think about it, especially this idea, vritti, that vritti will be these different modifications or waves that take place in chitta. Some of them will be emotional, some will be cognitive, some will involve thinking, some will involve feeling, but it's the same. It's that same. If we think of it as some subtle substance, this chitta is thought of as some mind stuff kind of thing. There's no real distinction. On the other hand, there is a distinction to be made between the capacity to think and the capacity to feel. So there is some distinction there. When we talk about this pure heart, then my understanding is generally we're talking about the heart that's free from the passions, lust, anger, greed, pride, and all of those things. And when we talk about the pure mind, we talk about that mind that is quiet and free from any of the disturbances that we normally have. And the connection will be that the pure heart is the dominant element here. Unless the heart is pure, the mind will never become quiet. We can never make the mind quiet through practice of Abhyasa Yoga. This is why Sri Krishna says that you want to make the mind quiet, then you try this Abhyasa Yoga together with Vairagya, together with dispassion, together with freedom from anger and lust and pride and greed, freedom from desires, that you have to, first you have to make the heart pure if you want to make the mind quiet. So there's a slight difference, but really one thing, and because of the slight difference, they work together. And this is why all of the spiritual practices in all of the schools, for the jnani also, start with these moral and ethical codes that we have, or shamadama and things like that, that unless we practice a little purity of heart, and we practice cleanliness and good habits and have a moral code, ethical code and that, then there's no point in even trying spiritual life. So he says, after the purification of the heart, one can obtain divine love. One of the things about the impure heart is that it's a selfish heart. That the ego is there, only thinking about one's good, not caring about other people, longing for sense pleasure and enjoyment, which means not caring about others, we want it for ourselves. So this has to be done first. Now, one of the means of purifying the heart, of course, is spiritual practice. So it's not like we can't do anything until the heart is pure, then we shouldn't start a spiritual practice. We do them side by side. But there's a logical precedence to this, that if we want, we can't disregard this pure heart if we want to have higher realization. Of course, in the teachings of Christ, this was the most important teaching. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Most important teaching. This Nirmal Hridaya, this was the name given to Mother Teresa's organization, the Sisters of the Pure Heart. So that was the most important teaching in Christianity also. Then one sees God through his grace. Now, why grace? Part of the purification of the heart is that this ego will die. If there's no I there, then there's no striving. There's just surrender. If there's just surrender, then there's salvation. So there has to be grace there. So this grace will come. Then he goes off to a slightly different subject about teaching others in a command from God. Now it's not so off the mark, because again, these Brahmos love to lecture people. In the case of Keshav, he was a highly advanced spiritual soul. Sri Ramakrishna knew that. At the same time, he also knew that it wasn't the same as an all-renouncing monk. That Thakur was pretty insistent about that. That for the highest realization, there should be some deep spirit of renunciation, and they're the ones who should be the ones who are preaching. But other than that, he had a tremendous regard for Keshav, but he heard so many of the lectures of the Brahmos, and he was never very impressed. Two problems: always talking about what a glorious creation you have made, number one, and number two, this idea of sin, which I don't know if they picked it up from the Christian missionaries or not. The Vaishnavas also talked about we're lowly, we're sinners, and things like that. So it's not necessarily from them, but they had that to a certain extent also. So one can teach others if one receives that command from God after seeing him. Before that, one should not lecture. It's in quotes. Thakur knew a few English words, so probably it means he used the word lecture. There's a song that says, "You have set up no image here within the shrine, O fool, blowing the conch. You simply make confusion worse confounded." This is a song that we come across many times. There's a story that there was a very simple young man named Podo. Padmalochan was his name. They called him Podo. And there was a very old, dilapidated, small temple. You'll see these things, just a tiny little thing that hadn't been used in years, that sometimes these trees grow up inside, you can hardly get in the middle of it, and the bats and pigeons and things will live in there. So this was like that. It was all dirty inside and had dilapidated, hadn't been used in years, and yet they heard one morning the blowing of a conch. And they thought, oh, what is this? And they say the Podo is blowing the conch. That means calling people to worship. So they all thought, how wonderful, that he must have cleaned out the whole thing and installed the image, and now we can start worshiping there again. But it says, you have set up no image there within the shrine, O fool, addressing Podo. And it says, you haven't cleaned out anything. And the 11 bats are living there. That means that all of the sense organs and the organs of action in the mind, that they haven't been purified or anything. They're covered with bad droppings and things. Blowing the conch, you simply make confusion worse confounded. So he's saying that you fools, you yourself don't know anything, and you're lecturing other people. That you'll simply confuse them even more. That unless one has some really higher type of experience, then it's not good to lecture. We're lucky. We have Thakur to hold on to. That we don't have to figure these things out on our own. Otherwise, we'd be in worse shape. But we have our roadmap here. We don't have to guess at what types of things to tell people, because Thakur said everything for us. So he says, you should first cleanse the shrine of your heart. Then you should install the deity and arrange worship. Now, God dwells within the heart. We know that. This is just a different way of looking at it. It's saying we want to bring God into the heart. That means if we want to do our meditation and try to feel God dwelling within the heart, try to picture God sitting within the heart center, then we have to cleanse the heart first. Install the deity and arrange worship. As yet nothing has been done. What can you achieve by blowing the conch shell and simply making a loud noise? So this is, again, talking about the lecturing of the Brahmo Samaj, but also about us. If we want to sit for meditation, picture God dwelling within the heart, then we have to rid the heart of these lower tendencies and selfishness. Vijay sat on a raised stool and conducted the worship according to the rules of the Brahmo Samaj. Afterwards, he sat by the master. This happened several times, and Vijay very often is quite hesitant that, oh, you have come, Thakur, you have come, we're all enjoying your company so much, why don't we can dispense with it today? And Thakur said, no, you should continue as is the custom, then follow that. Thakur liked to see things very orderly that way. So that's how he heard many times. And he was curious. He wanted to know what were the things that they were telling people. Would it be helpful for them? Could he have any influence even on these acharyas and everything? So he was curious about that. So Vijay sat on a raised stool and conducted the worship according to the rules of the Brahmo Samaj. So that'll be conducting the worship. There'll be some group chanting and some things from the Upanishads. I don't know what other types of worship. There's no image or anything like that. But there'll be some lecture, some more like a sermon, something like that. So afterwards he sat by the master. Master to Vijay, will you tell me one thing? And remember, Thakur loved Vijay. And Vijay loved Thakur. They had a very nice relationship. There was no hint of jealousy or anything like that, or ill feeling, or it was a very, very beautiful, sweet relationship. And because of Thakur's influence, he renounced everything, gave up family and the Brahmo Samaj and became a sannyasi. Will you tell me one thing? Why did you harp so much on sin? Because Vijay also came from a very orthodox Vaishnava family. It was a little bit uncharacteristic for someone with his background to become a Brahmo. And Thakur knew that, and he said that this is your mistake, Vijay. You were born with the bhakti in your blood. He was a Goswami. That means he could trace his lineage directly back to one of the companions of Chaitanya Dev. So he said, why do you harp so much on sin by repeating 100 times, I am a sinner? One verily becomes a sinner. One should have such faith as to be able to say, what? I have taken the name of God. How can I be a sinner? God is our Father and Mother. Tell him, O Lord, I have committed sins, but I won't repeat them. This was another thing that Thakur said, okay, we've all done things in the past. Don't dwell on it. Don't harp on it. Just make some commitment to try not to repeat it, that's all. Otherwise, if you keep dwelling on it, then you'll convince yourself, yes, I am a sinner. He said there's nothing helpful about that, beneficial. Repeat the other side. I'm a child of the Divine Mother. Swamiji loved this idea, this Amritasya Putra, that we're children of immortal bliss. So he didn't, it's a very progressive idea, actually, that Thakur had, and Swamiji emphasized it so much. The only sin there is really is calling somebody a sinner. And thought of sin as a great weakness. So he got that from Thakur. So he said one should have such faith as to be able to say, what? I have taken the name of God. How can I be a sinner? God is our Father and Mother. Tell him, O Lord, I have committed sins, but I won't repeat them. Chant his name and purify your body and mind. Purify your tongue by singing God's holy name. Okay, we can stop here. This is the end of that day. We don't know what day it was. And then, curiously enough, we have December 1882 without a date. The next two, at least. I never noticed that before. So we'll begin there next time. This is page 159. And we will close with our chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukam Bhathudavikraham Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto all. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you next time.